Hi guys, welcome to episode 2 of our CISO Talks. We really hope you enjoy our stay with us today and enjoy the chats that we get into very, very shortly. But I just want to remind you to click the subscribe button below and also onto the bell icon and make sure that you keep updated with all of our regular podcasts and updates. And yeah, so let's get to it.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, Aidan, so let's get started. I think one of the key questions I'd like to ask you really is about cybersecurity and really our current approach to cybersecurity in society today. Is it a broken system? Is it an ideology? Is it a problem? What's right? What's wrong with it at the minute?
It's not working. It clearly isn't working. I mean, its data breaches are making the news more often than ever before.
Right.
And we are not treating data with the respect that it deserves. I arguably think data security is perhaps worse now than it was 20 years ago.
Okay. So what really is wrong with it?
I think one of the biggest problems is I think that when I say we, I think that I think enterprises are perhaps forgetting some of the basics. It's a very, very complex topic, of course. But I think that we, as you know, we go to many trade shows. We do the InfoSec shows,
Sure.
We do the RSA shows, we do all of these different shows around the world. And when we start getting into conversations with CISOs, IT security professionals, and we ask them some we consider to be quite fundamental questions around how they protect their data, it appears that there's some pretty big gaps in how much is known around these things as well. I think specifically, I mean, the first thing is where is your data? Because let's be honest, right? Data is really what really matters. Right? When we think about IT security as a whole, the only reason we really care about these things is because we want to keep the data secure. That's what really matters.
Sure.
Let's take that as a given,
Yeah.
right? So the first thing in our view that is really missing is I think there's so many enterprises that just don't know where their sensitive data is. If you want to put it another way, they don't know where their risk is.
Right.
Like they wouldn't know if some specific data that was really sensitive to their organisation was in locations that it shouldn't be. I think that's probably one of the big problems that I definitely see enterprises facing, and it's a big reason why issues occur as well, right?
Do you think that it perhaps, I get your point, but do you think this is perhaps a concern, certainly at CISO level, where they're thinking, we have got a problem, but I don't want to lift that lid on it just in case it opens a can of worms? Do you think that goes on in enterprise now?
Yeah, I'm sure it does. But I think also it's one of this sort of chicken and egg situation as well, where until you start to figure out where your sensitive data is, and still you start to kind of get into these things, you might not even realise you have a problem. It might not be that they genuinely might not think they've got a problem, but until they start to look into it, I don't know whether they'll actually know. And it's again, it sort of leads me on really well to the next part. Really is around access and sort of everyone's talking about sort of least privilege and that's so important because one of the main reasons that we also see so many issues when it comes to data security is excessive permissions. People get granted access to anything and everything so easily, and I think that this is one of the biggest things that we can do. One of the biggest things enterprises can do is make sure that they only grant access to those people that need it, right? I mean, I think that's common sense, right?
It is, but I think a lot of organisations raise the objection that, no, I know who I'm employing, I trust my employees,
right?
And, I don't need to be monitoring them all the time, and it's just not a big problem for them. Do you not think that's a valid objection?
No, not at all, because trust is not a security strategy. It's kind of expect what you inspect, unless you... Unfortunately, the reality is, and it's not necessarily even that they're going to do something malicious. It might be something by accident. It might be that they inadvertently share some information that they shouldn't share. It might be that actually, that they've been compromised in some way as well. Right. And I think that so it's not necessarily... I don't totally agree with that. No, I don't think the trust is definitely not enough.
No, you're right. Yeah, I get it. For example, I suppose if an employee has handed a notice in, for example, it's clear that really they present a risk to the organisation at that time.
Right.
Certainly when you employ someone into an organisation, that you're sort of essentially giving them all the keys to the castle. You're giving them access to the data of the business. That's a problem, isn't it?
Yeah, it can be. I think one of the fundamental things, I think you need to think about your users, you need to think about what risks individual users cause to the organisation, and you need to be proactive in understanding, just in general, how your users are interacting with the data to your organisation. It really matters.
Okay.
Now let's be straight about this. Figuring out and getting alerts or reports when people are copying files and modifying folders or changing, that's all well and good, but the fact of the matter is that information is sort of useless unless you've got some mechanism of gleaning from that, sort of whether it's normal or not, whether it's anomalous or not, whether that it deviates from trends that has previously been seen in the organisation, because it's just another alert. Otherwise, it just becomes just another alert, and it's not realistic for necessarily for IT security teams to look at every single alert and every,
of course.
And I think it's also true to say that a lot of enterprises are surviving. They're putting out fires. They're reacting to incidents and threats, noisy incidents and threats, whereas their biggest problem, their biggest issue, might be something they can't even see.
Yeah, sure.
It might be something that they're not even watching. They're not even looking for, and yet it's happening right under their nose.
Yeah, I get that. Okay, yeah, that's a good point. I think it's along the same lines. I mean, you look at sort of the return on investment aspect as far as an organisation is concerned. I mean, you've got to agree it's a problem for a company to think, right, what value do I place on knowing those risks that I didn't know before? And do you think it's a real minefield for organisations to try and get or foresee that they're actually going to get a return on investment when they invest in these kind of products to get the job done?
Yeah, and I guess one of the problems sometimes is trying to justify spend on something that you perhaps don't even know is causing you pain.
Yeah.
It is problematic. Really, it's easy to get investment when you've seen that after an event. And we saw an interesting meme on social media recently where they were saying that here's your cybersecurity budget before an incident and after an incident, and obviously it's significantly different after an event. So I think that perhaps, and I know it's difficult, but we need to take perhaps a lot more proactive approach to thinking about our risk.
Sure.
And I think that that's something that that causes an issue, because I think it's just survival for a lot of IT teams as well.
Yeah, totally.
And I guess that, I think it's changing. I think that cybersecurity in general is being recognised more as a business problem. We're becoming more socially aware about cybersecurity, data security. I mean, the fact I'm having conversations with my technophobe father-in-law about cybersecurity really explains this. It's making mainstream news and mainstream press, and I think that that's a really good thing, right? Because we're creating the culture in which it is appropriate to handle data with care.
Yeah.
And I think that that's good. That's a good thing.
Totally. So it's no longer down to the IT team to resolve that whole problem.
No longer. It's not so much as it was a technical problem. It is being recognised as a business problem.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. I mean, do you think it's an expensive undertaking for an organisation to even grasp these basics of what we deem to be run-of-the-mill security best practices? Do you think it can be an exciting
Of course, and it's one of these things. But I think that I think the most important thing is prioritising where you spend your money.
Yeah.
Because obviously there's so many vendors trying to convince you that their vendor is going to protect you from everything, and it will do it. But the reality is it's as much about process as it is about spending the money as well.
Yeah, of course.
So our view is, look, identify what really matters to your organisation the most, right? And I think in most instances, it's fair to say, in nearly all instances, it's the data that really matters, right? The data is at the core of your enterprise, right? So the next logical step for us is, get a solution that's holistic, that brings together all of these things in one solution, where you know where your data is, you know who's got access to your data, and you know how your users and employees are interacting with the data. Figure out what's happened to these systems that govern access to the data. That's a good starting point.
Yeah.
Like all of the other security that you have in place, critical. By no means am I saying that that's not important. I'm saying that start with the data and work your way out.
Yeah.
That's going to be the best way you can keep your data safe.
Got you. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, yeah. So really, we agree that there's like a disparity between perhaps a hotel having a data breach as opposed to a hospital or a bank having a data breach. They're very different situations. One might be able to live with it.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the implications are for any organisation, if someone takes the data from you, if someone were to compromise or abuse your data as an enterprise, it's going to have an impact whoever you are. It doesn't matter what sector you are, but obviously the social implications are significantly greater if someone hacks a hospital as opposed to someone hacks the
Totally.
bank. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we have a responsibility, irrespective of what industry we're in, to keep our data safe, to treat it with respect, to treat it more like we did 20 years ago when we locked it away in safes, right?
Right, yeah.
And I think that we need to start treating data like cash.
We do.
It's the only way in which we're going to have any hope of stopping enterprises becoming more and more headlines in mainstream press, right?
Makes sense. Makes sense. Okay, guys, well, thanks ever so much for joining us on our podcast today. Please stay tuned for next week's edition of CISO Talks. And remember, please make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on our social media channels, click the subscribe button below, and we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot.
Jason, thank you.